But there's more to Scarborough than all this. It's also a place stuffed with historical interest.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special edition of the Genesis Podcast. I'm your host, DJ Briscoe. This podcast is brought to you by Beatfact Music in association with Anchor FM. I'm going to get right down to this. So I'm going to start off with this. The 13th Amendment, which was formally abolished slavery in the United States, passed by the Senate on April 8, 1864, and the House on January 31st, 1865. On February 1st, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln approved the joint resolution of Congress submitting the proposed amendment to the state legislators. The necessary number of states ratified it by December 6, 1865. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution provides that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for the crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Ladies and gentlemen, on February 23rd of this year, 2020, around 1 p.m., a young man by the name of Ahmaud Arbery, hopefully I pronounced this gentleman's name correctly, all respect to the brother, was attacked by two men who said that they thought he was apparently running away from armed robbery or whatever the hell it was. Subsequently, Travis McDaniel, the son of Gregory McMichael, the father, his son Travis, who had a shotgun, decided to approach this young brother, and there's a little tussle, subsequently shot him. Mr. Gregory McMichael, who's a former police officer, had a .357 Magnum on him. So both these gentlemen had a Magnum. Both these gentlemen had firearms in their possession, which is the norm in the United States of America now. On May 7th, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation announced that these two gentlemen will now be arrested for murder of this young gentleman 3 months after this whole thing transpired. To me, it's just interesting how long this situation has been processed for this to come to fruition. After multiple complaints, after petitions, after rallies, after all sorts of things. The story behind this is so intriguing because, this has become such a normal pattern throughout the United States in the last how many years, for a long time actually. The thing that makes it so intriguing now is that now we have camera footage, and we're seeing all this camera footage of this vile and diabolical acts that are being performed on black men within the United States through racism, through hate crimes. These hate crimes that are being performed on a regular basis now, and it's taking forever for these guys to be prosecuted under the United States justice system, which is probably one of the most corrupted systems in the world. But that's a whole different podcast. A quick example, former NBA player Shannon Brown was arrested with aggravated assault because apparently he pulled a gun on people who were coming to a house that he had for sale with, apparently unannounced. But quickly they were able to charge him with aggravated assault. That took less than, a couple hours? But these two guys, crime is wide open. It was done. It happened. They acted on it. Took 3 months to be charged. If you all think that America has gotten over racism or has improved or has looked at things in a different light, no, it hasn't. It's gotten worse. Because even now with the videos that are provided for these situations, still these guys are not being prosecuted. Still these criminals are not being prosecuted. People choked to death. People being, invaded in their own house and killed. I mean, the list goes on and on. People being shot in their car. It's just a continuous cycle of criminal bigotry that continues. It's sickening. Is there any safe haven in that country? It's such an injustice to the point that we have to sit here and ask ourselves, that Constitution, that amendment that was formally ratified in 1865, is it really ratified? Or is it just something that was written up, signed just to kind of keep things on the hush? That 13th Amendment that's been adopted apparently by the Constitution of the United States of America was ratified 155 years ago. And as you watch how things have transpired since then, into the early 1900s, the 1920s, the 30s, the 50s, the 60s, 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000, then of course the 2010s, and now we get into 2020 and it's still the same thing. There hasn't been any change. There hasn't been any type of modification or any type of way of showing the black people of that country that there's an improvement, that they could walk the streets without being harassed, without being ridiculed, without being judged. You got to ask yourself, what am I to do? And I strongly shout out to all the young black, all the middle, all the elderly who continue to do what's best to do the right thing, although the system is not built. The system is not built for black people. Let's just keep it 100. Now, anybody listening to this podcast, you don't like what you're hearing, I'm sorry, but I'm not here to butter your bread. This is not a podcast that's run by sponsors. We have no sponsorship here on the Genesis podcast. This is all done solely by me, run by me. This is raw edit. There's no anything. We're not here to impress sponsorship. This is not an Illuminati situation here. This is my podcast. And the system is not built for black people. If you look at the Constitution of the United States of America, it is not built for black people. Black people are not supposed to succeed. They are supposed to be middle class or poor. They don't want any black people to be rich. You think they want black people to be doctors, lawyers? They don't want that. You see, as athletes, they can control you and say, tomorrow morning, we're going to stop your check. You see it in the NFL all the time where they just cut contracts right away. The NBA, you see it all the time in the NBA. More and more players' life expectancy in the league is shorter. except for the major stars, because the major stars are making these guys billions of dollars. Billions and billions of dollars. And this murder that happened on February 23rd is another example of how way behind the United States is. And it also shows you that the amendment that was signed in 1865, means absolutely nothing. If it meant something, it would have changed something. Something would have changed. There would have been some type of moderation. Not balance, because they don't want balance. They don't want balance, but moderation. There has been none. So what are the answers to this? How does this change? How do we, as a black community, not just the black community here in Canada, where I'm doing this podcast from, where I represent, where I live, but how do you go through this? How do you go on? How do you live life in the United States and other countries in the world who I'm sure going through the same things, but it's just not publicized? Because again, we know that the media only publicize what they want for people to see. But we all have to understand that regardless of what has just transpired here, we have to understand that it's our duty to educate ourselves about these things. Understand and learn your laws, understand and know your rights, even though they don't care about your rights, even though they don't respect your rights, and even though they'll tell you something else to negate your rights. You still got to go out and understand them. So, it's crazy. As a black community, we got to change our focus. We can't be standing in the line May 1st for a pair of Jordans. That's ridiculous. Michael Jordan is worth $2.1 billion, which was last updated on the Forbes magazine, Forbes website actually, the end of April. Yes, I do look at the Forbes magazine. These are things you got to know. Michael Jordan's a rich guy. He doesn't have to worry. He's probably got all the protection he needs. You guys, black folks, we got to support each other. I understand you want to support Michael Jordan, but you got to support the real causes too. So, this case is very, very interesting. I felt that I needed to talk about it. I felt I needed to express my take on it. Because we're not going in the right direction. We're going way back in the wrong direction, and we got to start putting on our big boy pants and really trying to figure out what are our goals. How do we want to accomplish? How do we want to get out of this view that they see us? So we got to do a better job, but the Constitution of the United States needs to be completely revised. Otherwise, this stuff is going to continue. Ladies and gentlemen, I could talk about this all night, but I'm not going to. I'm going to shut it down. But this podcast is brought to you by Beat Fact Music in association with Anchor FM. It will be available on YouTube, available on Audio Mac, and I am now working on a situation coming soon to get Apple going, so that every time I boom it goes right on Apple. Instead of I have to put it on, I just go straight to Apple. So stay tuned for that. That'll be more information will be given in a future podcast. But ladies and gentlemen, have yourselves a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good day, wherever you are in the world. This was a Genesis podcast. Have yourselves a good night. Blessings and guidance.